I'd like to talk about the fascists, please, because this seems to be the closing argument of the Democrats, that Donald Trump is a fascist and we cannot trust Donald Trump. When Harry Truman ran against Governor Dewey, he called Governor Dewey the second coming of Hitler. Southern Democrats, when Dwight Eisenhower decided to bring in the National Guard to integrate schools, called him Hitler. Ronald Reagan was Hitler, George H.W. Bush was Hitler, George W. Bush was Hitler. Until 5 minutes ago, Dick Cheney was Hitler, Paul Ryan was Hitler, John Boehner was Hitler, Newt Gingrich was Hitler, Sarah Palin was Hitler, John McCain was Hitler, Mitt Romney was Hitler, Donald Trump is Hitler. Every Republican is Hitler, to not just the Democrats and the press. But you know who is throwing grandmothers, wheelchair-bound grandmothers, in prison for praying in an abortion clinic? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You know who's prosecuting a whistleblowing doctor in Texas for exposing a Texas hospital to perform transition surgeries contrary to law? The Biden-Harris administration. You know who wants to blow up the United States Senate by ending the filibuster so she can pack the Supreme Court with judges so that she can get a progressive way, because progressive haven't won elections in this country enough to shape the Supreme Court, but conservatives following the election laws of this country have? That would be Kamala Harris. You want to talk about ending the republic? Kamala Harris and the Democrats' desire to blow up the filibuster, end the United States Senate as we know it, and pack the Supreme Court to impose progressive will on us. That's the authoritarian in the room. That's the fascist in the room. That's the one that has radicalized me in this election. I would have been perfectly happy sitting on the sidelines rooting for injuries because I don't like any of them. But there's one candidate in the race who supports rounding up grandmothers in wheelchairs and throwing them in prison, and one who's willing to pardon those grandmothers. There's one candidate in this race who is willing to end the filibuster, thereby ending the United States Senate as we know it, thereby ending the Supreme Court as the founders intended it, so that she can enact what she hasn't been able to enact by winning elections. That would be Kamala Harris. Donald Trump won't do those things. You can tell me all you want that John Kelly says Donald Trump praised Hitler in private. We had one term of Donald Trump and he wasn't Hitler. I have high doubts he'll be Hitler in the second term, but I know who's throwing wheelchair-bound grandmothers in prison for praying. You'll have to excuse me for not caring about John Kelly's statements about Donald Trump. I don't care. What I care is that Donald Trump's opponents believe the United States was founded in sin and is systemically racist and evil. That is the view of the progressives who advise Kamala Harris. Donald Trump happens to love this country. Kamala Harris will only love this country if it bends to her will. You want me to care about fascists? The fascists are in the White House right now. You want me to care about authoritarians? They're in the White House right now. You don't want boys in your girls' locker room in your small town? Good luck getting money from the federal government. You don't want prisoners' transition surgeries paid for with your tax dollars? Too bad. You want to preserve the United States Senate as a saucer in which the heat of the House can cool? Good luck. You're not going to get it. They want to turn it into a house. Here's the thing. Republicans for 50 years since Roe v. Wade made persuasive cases to elect pro-life presidents and pro-life senators to get a pro-life United States Supreme Court, and they were able to do it. Why? Because Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats decided to screw their rules and blow up the filibuster for judicial nominees, and Mitch McConnell finished it off. He warned them what would happen, and they did it anyway. It was the Democrats who decided, despite the rules of the Senate, to override the rules of the Senate so that they could pack federal courts with progressive judges. All Mitch McConnell did was finish off what they started. He wasn't going to let Harry Reid have his way with lower court judges. Of course, the Republicans were going to do exactly what the Senate Democrats did. The Senate Democrats set the precedent. Mitch McConnell and the Republicans finished off that precedent, getting rid completely of the filibuster for nominations in the Senate. So now what do Democrats want to do? Democrats want to get rid of the filibuster for all legislation so they can pass abortion on demand in the United States Senate, and they can fill up the Supreme Court with additional progressive picks. Why? Because for 50 years, Republicans won Senate seats and presidential elections, and Democrats lost those seats and elections, and Republicans, using the tools within the Constitution and the framework of this republic, were able to ultimately get a conservative Supreme Court. And the Democrats don't want to have to win elections. They don't want to have to make the persuasive case. They don't want to have to win the presidency. They want to just blow up the rules of the Senate to get their way. They want to pack their friends on the Supreme Court to get their way. That sounds pretty damn authoritarian to me. Sounds pretty fascist to me. So you can lecture me, Democrats, all you want on how Donald Trump is some sort of novel threat to the United States, when it's the Democrats themselves literally openly campaigning on blowing up the rules of the Senate so they can pack the Supreme Court with their own political nominees. They have tried to discredit the Electoral College because it stands in their way of power. They want to discredit the Senate because it stands in their way of power. They want to discredit the Supreme Court because it stands in the way of the power, just like Hitler did, undermining the institutions of Germany before ultimately taking power. You want to talk about Hitler, they're using his playbook. And they want to blast Donald Trump. You'll have to forgive me for not caring what John Kelly said. The man says Donald Trump made all these flattering statements about Hitler and his generals, and he decided to continue working for the next Hitler. I'll put it to you this way. Democrats could come out tomorrow and declare that Donald Trump is growing a little black mustache and working on his German, and I'll still consider the Democrats more Nazi-like than Donald Trump. Why? Again, he's not throwing wheelchair-bound grandmothers in prison, and the Democrats have just done that. He's not prosecuting whistleblowers in hospitals. The Democrats, they're doing that. He's not forcing small towns in America to put trans boys in girls' bathrooms. The Democrats are doing that. He's not threatening local law enforcement, their federal funding, if they don't comply with the Democrats' nonsense. They're doing that. He's not letting Venezuelan gangs into this country. They're doing that. He's not letting into this country a bunch of illegal aliens who are murdering Americans. They're doing that. He's not turning his back on Israel because some Arab demographic in Michigan is upset about the way the election might go. They're doing that. You'll have to forgive me for not following the Democrats' arguments in this election. There are a lot of people who have convinced themselves that Donald Trump is some terrible, awful person. I hadn't liked him to begin with. But you know what I don't like? I don't like the Democrats openly campaigning for blowing up American institutions that stand in the way of their power, and that's what they openly are campaigning on. I don't like anybody running for president of the United States. But I know one of them isn't going to throw grandmothers in prison for praying, and one of them already has. I don't like either one of these candidates running for president, but I know one of them doesn't think this country is systemically racist, and the other's been campaigning on that fact. I don't particularly care for either person running for president in this country, but I know one of them has funded people burning down America, and the other one hasn't. Oh, spare me January 6th. Look at Wisconsin, look at Minnesota, look at Washington, D.C. Democrats marched through the streets burning down small businesses, throwing Molotov cocktails, and the Democrats and media were like, it's a fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Do you know more property damage was done by the post-George Floyd riots by progressives than by what happened on January 6th? Do I think January 6th was good? No, I do not think it was good. But spare me your moral repugnancy for Donald Trump and January 6th when you won't condemn the rioters. In fact, when small business owners were protesting their businesses being shut down on COVID, you progressives were vilifying them. You had reporters actually on television saying, if they get COVID, they should be denied treatment. And then post-George Floyd, by God, you better get in the streets and get COVID as proof you were sufficiently surrounded by others burning down America. Spare me your double standard outrage about Donald Trump, who has not thrown wheelchair-bound grandmothers in prison for praying at abortion clinics, and Joe Biden has. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump when your side is campaigning on blowing up the United States Senate as the institution it is so you can jam through everything you otherwise haven't been able to jam through. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump as an authoritarian when you want to destroy the United States Supreme Court as the founders built it, pack it full of progressives to undermine a generation's worth of laws in this country because you haven't been able to win elections. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump when you have systemically campaigned on systemic racism in this country that is the last best hope for mankind, and you think it does evil in the world that needs to be constrained. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump when you believe this country was founded not in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but in slavery and keeping people in chains. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump when you have decided that the good in this country is bad and the bad is good, and you've decided that deviant should be normal and normal should be deviant. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump when you around the world have scaled back American interests and put American lives in jeopardy by squandering our national security strengths. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump, please. You can call him a Nazi, you can call him a fascist, you can call him the second coming of Hitler, but you've done that to every single Republican since World War II ended. You are the boy who cried wolf. You are the people who blast this country and loathed it unless you're in charge of it. You think the Republicans are bad because they don't like America unless Donald Trump's in charge. They learned it by watching you. I'm sorry. I couldn't care less what John Kelly said about Donald Trump and what Donald Trump supposedly said when he continued working for the man after he supposedly said it. What I care about is what you Democrats have not just said, but you've done and what you said you want to do. Why should I not believe you when you say you want to destroy the Supreme Court as it stands? Why should I not believe you when you say you want to destroy the Senate as it stands? Why should I not believe you when you want to destroy the Electoral College as it stands? And each of those things, what do they have in common? They're impediments to your power. You know what the fascists, the Nazis, the authoritarians, and the tyrants want? Power. And you people sure want a hell of a lot of power, and you don't want to surrender it, and you delegitimize any institution that stands in your way from grabbing power and keeping power. And when this election is over, if you lose, you're going to blame the Russians, you're going to blame the Iranians, you're going to blame American men, you're going to blame American voters, you're going to blame everyone. You're not going to take responsibility for yourselves. You're not going to think maybe we should have reined it in. You're not going to think maybe we went too far. You're not going to think maybe we're too fringe. You're not going to think maybe we went too progressive. No, you're going to blame everyone else because you never have the ability to institutionally look and analyze yourselves and what you stand for and what you want. You never have the ability to self-reflect on why the American Republic has rejected you. You blame them, you hate them, you delegitimize the institutions, and you call everybody else a Nazi and fascist while it is your party burning down small businesses across America. It is your party allowing homelessness to run rampant, and you just change the name to urban camping and say it's fine. It's your party putting boys into girls' sports and taking girls' scholarships away from them in the name of equity. It is your party that wants to let all sorts of criminals into this country and then demand we give them amnesty. It is your party literally throwing wheelchair-bound grandmothers into jail for praying at abortion clinics. Spare me your outrage about Donald Trump.
When the world seems crazy, he'll keep you sane. It's the Eric Erickson Show.
1220 in the Cool Ray Carrier.